Kipling is a very small, isolated farming community in western Canada. The town has a population of little more than 1,000 people. Everyone there depends on the Kipling Hospital to care for them if they need help. In 1992, Kipling's favorite doctor was Dr. John Schneeberger. His patients considered themselves very fortunate to have such a skilled young doctor. They also appreciated the fact that he was a tireless fundraiser for other things he knew they needed, like a community pool for the town. Life was good for Dr. Schneeberger and his family, but all that changed very quickly when one of his patients accused him of a terrible crime. The patient's name was Candace, a 24-year-old single mother who had been Dr. Schneeberger's patient for more than a year. In fact, he had delivered her baby daughter just 9 months before. But on the morning of November 3rd, 1992, Candace walked into the headquarters of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and made the following statement. "I was very upset and went to the hospital in Kipling. Dr. Schneeberger decided to give me a shot of something to calm me down and gave me a needle in my right arm. I became drowsy. I couldn't move. My body felt numb. He helped me up onto his examination table. He flipped me over onto my left side, so my face was facing the wall. I could feel my panties being pushed down to my left side, and someone was having vaginal intercourse with me."
The patient told the police that at no time did she see the face of the person who sexually assaulted her while the sexual assault was going on.
Candace gave the police the underpants she was wearing that night. They were stained with semen. The news that Kipling's favorite doctor had been accused of rape quickly spread throughout the town. Most people in this small community thought that Candace was not telling the truth.
Truthfully, you can't just take one person's opinion and say, oh, he's guilty. No way. It couldn't happen.
To prove his innocence, Dr. Schneeberger volunteered to give a sample of his blood. This would enable the police to compare the doctor's DNA with the DNA found in the semen on Candace's underpants. The police lab ran not one, but 2 tests, and concluded that the doctor's DNA did not match the DNA from the semen.
DNA profiling said that he was not the person responsible, not in just from one test, but now 2 tests. The police decided that they would have to close the file. They simply had nowhere else to go with it.
The test's results confirmed the town's suspicion that Candace was just a neurotic who was secretly in love with the young doctor, and because he rejected her, she wanted to ruin him. As the years passed, the people of Kipling forgot about the Candace incident, and life returned to normal for Dr. Schneeberger and his family. But not for Candace. She was more determined than ever to prove to the people of Kipling that she was telling the truth. In 1995, she hired a private detective named Larry O'Brien and asked him to try to obtain another DNA sample from Dr. Schneeberger.
She was very convincing that she had been sexually assaulted. She was very frustrated. She was angry. And she was adamant that if we could obtain the samples, she would be forever thankful.
On the morning of March 23rd, 1996, Investigator O'Brien found the doctor's car. Knowing that under Canadian law, evidence obtained without a search warrant was still admissible in court, O'Brien entered the car.
I found a chapstick in the ashtray of his car. The chapstick was new for all intents and purposes, but the sharp edge that is usually found on a brand new chapstick was slightly worn down. It appeared as though it had been used once. I took the chapstick, I rubbed it 3 or 4 times on the window-type envelope. I sealed it, put it in another envelope, dated, timed, and initialed it, and I sent it off to the independent laboratory in British Columbia where it was analyzed.
This time, the result was different. The DNA sample taken from saliva on the chapstick matched the DNA found in the semen stain. Dr. Schneeberger insisted the chapstick wasn't his and submitted to another test. In this videotape, we see the technician is having a problem getting the needle into Dr. Schneeberger's arm. After he leaves the office, the technician has a quizzical look on her face. There is something very odd about the blood. In fact, the technician felt there was not enough viable blood this time to test for DNA. There was still no way to prove that Dr. Schneeberger had done anything wrong, but this would change dramatically. Just as police were about to ask for another blood test, suddenly the doctor's wife, Lisa Schneeberger, came to police and accused the doctor of raping her 13-year-old daughter.
The sexual assaults ranged from digital penetration, oral intercourse, right through to penile penetration or rape. She alleged on many occasions, especially in the latter years, she had been given a drug that seemed to act like Versed or midazolam, that seemed to make her drowsy, in fact, go to sleep, pass out. And she was very concerned that she had been sexually assaulted after being given this drug because she retained fleeting memories of sexual incidents with the doctor.
The prosecution, now provided with a court order, forced Dr. Schneeberger to be tested again. Only this time, the DNA tests would be more expensive.
He was required to surrender hair samples, samples of the cells on the inside of your mouth, and also a blood sample. We took the blood from the tip of one of his fingers on his right hand. All of those samples were sent away, and we received word from the crime lab in January of 1998 that in fact there was a match. The DNA profile of the samples that were taken under warrant matched the DNA profile of the semen that was found on the patient's panties.
6 months later, the good country doctor, John Schneeberger, went on trial for rape.
He's charged with aggravated sexual assault on the second complainant. The maximum penalty for that is life imprisonment. He's charged with 2 counts of administering a noxious substance to commit an indictable offense. Maximum penalty is life imprisonment on each. He's charged with 1 count of obstruction of justice. Maximum penalty on that is 10 years. And he's charged with 1 count of sexual assault, and the maximum is 10 years, I believe, on that as well.
It was in court that the doctor was forced to confess to how he almost got away with raping one young woman and his 13-year-old stepdaughter, and how he managed to fool DNA technicians for 7 years.
The doctor had been very clever. He had saved some of the blood from one of his patients, knowing that someday he might be asked to give blood for a test. He took that blood and placed it into a thin tube about 6 inches long, like this tube, and surgically inserted that tube into his arm, under the skin, right next to the vein. So whenever he was tested, the blood was being withdrawn from the tube and not from his vein, and the police were getting somebody else's blood.
Candace was present in the courtroom and found out what had happened for the first time.
When he started explaining it in the courtroom, I swallowed my breath. I thought I was going to have a panic attack. Like, he did surgery on himself. It was gross. And I just sat there as he was explaining how he cut his arm, and oh, yuck. Like, you're crazy.
In 1999, John Schneeberger was convicted of rape and subsequently lost his license to practice medicine. Despite this, many in the town of Kipling still stood by him.
I still feel the same way. I still think that John is not guilty.
I'd go to him tomorrow if he was back here. So would my whole family.
Although Dr. Schneeberger was facing life imprisonment, the judge gave him only 6 years. Why he got such a light sentence remains unanswered.
He should be locked up for a hell of a long time. He's going to end up killing someone. I've heard now that he's taking his bachelor's degree in administration, which will mean that he can become an administrator of a hospital. He will be ordering in the medications for the hospital. He should not have any access to any medications whatsoever, because he will continue to use them.